Boom.
Nobody's coming to America. Guess not.
They fronting. They know they sold it.
All right, here's the YouTube link. Same deal, same place. You guys know it. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. First thing to do is let me know that you can hear me. I don't know what else rhymes for free. Ay, ay, ay. So, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Oh shit, Alan to the fucking punchline. He fucking beat everybody. Oh shit, Alan to the fucking punchline. All right, awesome. So you guys should be able to hear me, and I can see some of you already can. Thank you for mentioning that, Sean. All right. So, we're going to talk about reverbs and delays in a second, but in order to understand how to apply reverbs and delays, I need to go over this concept called buses and aux inputs. So essentially on consoles, for those of you who have done the consoles, I've talked about auxes and how they're used for time-based effects, right? Now that concept applies exactly onto Pro Tools, even though some of the terminology is different, the exact same concept. If you haven't looked at the consoles in person with me, then this is going to be brand new for you, and it'll make more sense when you get on Pro Tools and on the consoles. So let's talk about buses, all right? So I told you at some point that when you click on the inputs or the outputs of any track, right, you get a couple of options, right? The two main ones being you can choose, when you click on an output, you can either choose an output, meaning a physical output from an interface, like your headphones, or like if you have an interface with all these outputs, a physical output. It exists in the real world. Your other option is to go to this thing called bus, right? Buses are virtual pathways within Pro Tools. They're not anything real. They exist within the DAW, right? And a bus, all it does is that it allows you to send audio from one place to another place. So think of this bus as like a bridge between 2 points, right? I want to go from A to B, and I use a bus to get there. That's essentially all it means, right? If you want to get super deep, when you go to output and you see all your physical outputs, what Pro Tools is actually saying is, hey, 1 and 2 is a virtual bus in Pro Tools, which then maps onto your monitor left and right. So actually, it's the right side of these outputs, which is the physical output, and the left side is actually a virtual output. But that's super deep, so I don't want you to go there. I want you to focus on these buses over here, right? Just buses with random numbers on them. These are virtual paths. They allow you to connect audio from one place to another place. So let's take an example, right? If I hit play, you can hear it because it's going to output 1 and 2. But if I go to bus 1 and 2, you're not going to hear it, right? You can see it's still playing, but you don't actually hear it because the signal is going to bus 1 and 2. It's going to a different bridge, a different connecting bridge. So the problem is, if we do want to hear it, yes, you can. You can name your buses whatever you want. Now, the problem is, if your signal is going to bus 1 and 2, how can I actually hear it then? Can I receive it somewhere else? Absolutely. So because this is a mono track, I'm just going to take the example of one bus. I'm going to go to output bus 1. And again, you won't be able to hear it at all. All right. What I then will do is I'm going to create a mono audio track and call it receive. Let's just call it receive, right? If I could spell correctly. I don't know if that's receive, but we're going to go with it. Man, I always used to fuck that up in English. I remember the teacher called me out, like, I remember so vividly when I was, I grew up in England for a while, and we had this spelling test, and I kept, like, all those, like, perceive, receive, retrieve, always fucked them up, like the I before the E shit. And I remember so vividly my teacher calling me out, saying like, gee, why do you keep messing these I's and E's up? I was like, damn, okay, sorry. All right, anyway. So I've created a mono audio track called receive, right? So what's happening now is my vocals, which are on the top track, they are outputting to bus 1, right? The signal is going completely into bus 1. If I create a track that receives from bus 1, then I should be able to get that audio again. So when I go to the receive track and select the input, set the input to bus 1, watch this. And of course I have to record enable because I'm recording, right? I'm receiving information onto the audio track. So watch what happens when I record.
And now, never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud.
We can hear it because it's coming into the receive track and coming to my headphone output. All right, this is very important, right? So if you want, we can look at it a different way, right? We can look at it from this view. So the vocal track is outputting to bus 1, and then that signal is being received through input bus 1 by this track. So if I just input monitor,
And now,
you can hear it.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so
If I mute
loud.
this,
And
you're not going to hear anything because, again, the vocals are outputting through bus 1, and that's being received by receive track. This is very, very important and very, very hard to understand sometimes, but it's signal flow. Yeah, exactly. It's signal flow essentials. Right? Yo, we're on YouTube, so see you there if you're just joining. Link in the chat. All right. So,
and now,
very important. You're outputting, so you have your track, your vocal track. You output it through bus 1. Bus 1 is received on the receive track. So there you go. Or you can call it the print track, right? This is where you receive the
and
signal.
now,
So when you record,
never said guarantee.
it records the vocal.
I shouldn't speak so loud.
Now here's another thing for you. Instead of outputting to bus 1, I'm going to output the main vocals back to my headphones, right? So even if I mute this,
You won't do for me.
I can hear it.
Force me not.
but here's what I'm going to do. In the sends section of your track, where it says send, if you don't see this, you go to the bottom where the white bar is. Make sure sends are enabled. Again, you can do this over here as well. Sends, right? I'm going to go to the sends, and I'm going to click on one of the sends and send to bus 1. Now you might think, well, is that the same thing? No. Sends are used to send a copy of the signal to another place. So now your vocal track is going to 2 places. It's going to your headphones, right? Your output over here, your main output, which is your headphones. And then using this bus, I can use this fader that pops up whenever I click on it. I can use this fader to feed a copy of the signal to the print track. So watch what happens as I turn this up.
You won't do for me, then force me not to run.
See?
Well, I can't give you what you need, but I can give
See how
you
the signal is feeding into that? And if I unmute it, you'll hear the volume difference.
what you won't do for me, then force me not to run. Well, I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now.
So what's happening is you're hearing the signal twice. One from the main track to your headphones, and then a copy is being sent through bus 1 to the print track, which is then also being sent to your headphones. This is very important in terms of signal flow, all right? Really try to wrap your head around this. Very, very, very important. So that is the concept of using buses, right? Now here's the thing. I'm able to send signals back and forth, which is great, right? I'm just going to get rid of this send. but I don't want to be able to, I don't want to have to record enable all the time in order to actually receive signal. That's kind of inefficient, right? And the reason for doing this is coming up soon. I'll tell you why in a second. So look, I don't want to keep hitting record all the time whenever I want to receive. So I'm going to delete this, and instead of creating a new audio track, I'm going to create what's called a Aux Input Track. All right? And I'm going to call this Aux Input, let's just call it receive again, right? Receiver, fine. That was an accident, but fine. Now look at that. It looks like a track. It's colored differently, but it doesn't have a record button or an input monitor button. And that's because aux tracks are always receiving information. They're always ready to receive information. In fact, that's their entire purpose, right? So look, when I go to the other view, the edit view, you see that the audio track, you can have a clip on it, but I can't bring this clip down to the aux track. Aux tracks cannot hold audio clips. Very important. Audio tracks hold audio clips. Aux tracks do not. However, they can both receive information or receive audio. All right? Audio tracks have to be record enabled. Aux tracks do not. So let's do the exact same thing. Let's go to this view. Set my vocals output to bus 1. All right, so right now you won't hear anything. If I just hit play and go to a vocal part, you won't hear anything. Right? You see the signal, but you're not hearing anything. But as soon as I go to my aux track and set my input to bus 1, you hear it. Right? So it's always listening for information as long as you set the input correctly. Now there's a couple of things that comes with auxes, right? Is that you can still add inserts and you can still send copies. It's pretty cool. The thing that you might not be aware of is that aux tracks have a weird solo situation. So check this out. I'm going to hit play, and then I'm going to solo the main vocal track. And watch what happens. I can't hear it now. Why? Because when I solo one track, it mutes everything else, right? Including the aux track. And this track is only going to bus 1, not to my headphones. So that means in order to actually hear it, both tracks have to be soloed. And that's super inefficient in my opinion. So aux tracks are always solo saved or permanently soloed, right? They are permanently soloed, and you can do that by holding Command or Control on a PC and clicking the solo button. So you see how it's now grayed out? I'll do one more time. 1, 2, 3, grayed out. So now the aux track is what we call solo saved or permanently soloed. All right? Very important, because now when I hit play and I solo the vocals, can still hear it. Right? So let's take another example of the main vocals are going to my headphones, but I'm going to use the send to send a copy of the vocals to bus 1, which is going to the aux. So check this out. As I turn it up, right? You're hearing the signal double over and over again, right? Or you're hearing the signal double because the second version is going to, or the copy is going to the receive track. That's awesome. But here's where it becomes even more interesting. If I turn this up to 0 dB, you'll hear it a lot louder, right? Because you're hearing two voices. You're hearing the main track and the copy of the track being sent. Main and the copy. If I turn down the main track, it'll turn down the copy being sent as well. So check this out. Right?
say too much.
All right. But if I go to the send and set up what's called a pre-fader, then this actual fader will not be affecting the copy being sent. So check this out. I'm going to reduce this volume again. I can close this really.
Loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my mind?
So now you're hearing the copy, but not the original, because it's pre-fader. And if you're hearing a sound, it's my fucking fader port. And that just allows me to do, you know, movements and stuff. So, all right. That's very important to understand. Sends and buses and pre-fader, very important. All right, so now you might be wondering, well, why would I ever want to send a copy to an aux track? That's a good question. Like, I think this is what Ty asked. Well, check this out. What if on the receiver track, I put in an effect? I put in like a crazy kind of distortion effect, maybe even. So maybe we can go with like, what do we want? Do I have the Saturn? Oh my God. Oh no, I don't. I was like, damn, I got it. No, I guess I don't. All right, so this is a guitar amp plugin, right? Now check this out. Using this little fader, again, you can use this by popping it up by clicking on it, or you can hold command and click on this little arrow and it kind of shows up here, which I kind of like, honestly. So check this out. You have your dry vocals and you're sending a copy of that vocals to the aux track, which is then processing it through a guitar amp. So you're going to hear the dry vocal with a distorted version of the vocal. Let me just set it to something that's a little more distorty. Check this out.
Loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my mind?
Right?
My loud, no.
What's happening is you have the dry vocal on one track and the distorted vocals on a separate track. It's pretty cool because then you can have dry and wet on two separate tracks. You can use the faders to level them appropriately. You can even add effects after them. It's really, really useful. And this is the fundamental way of how we apply time-based effects. All right. So now we're going to get into what I wanted to get into, which is reverbs. All right. Like I said, reverbs are used to create a sense of space, right, for the actual instrument. So let's take the example of the vocal, right? In order to do a reverb correctly or technically correctly, there's two ways to do it, right? One is to just put it on the insert. So if I go to my vocals, click, and I go to, say, reverb, I can go to deverb, right? And this is the standard Pro Tools reverb. You got all your different kinds of settings, and this is great. And you use this wet dry knob or wet dry slider to determine how much reverb you want. So if you're 100% wet, it's all reverb, right? And if I dial it back,
Something's unsaid, but I ain't leaving nothing. Shit. Untouched, baby's just too good to be just good enough.
so if you dial this in correctly,
Love it temporarily, I just call it like I see, yeah.
right, you can get a certain amount of reverb that you want. So a couple of things about reverb. The main aspects that you want to think about are decay, which is how long does it take for the reverb to go all the way down to 0. Pre-delay is the time difference between the first reflection and the original signal. It gives you that sense of space, really. Diffusion is the amount of reflections that's happening. And these are EQs that allow you to affect the high end of the actual reverb signal, not the original, right? It's pretty dope. Or whatever the signal is coming into this. So those are your different parameters, right? Now here's the thing. This is not the standard way of using reverb. It's fine. It works totally fine. Nothing wrong with it. But the correct way to do it is actually using auxes and buses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off right there. I'm going to create a stereo aux input, and I'm going to call it Vox Verb. Stereo because reverb, I want it to be spacious. Right? I want it to have left and right space. I create the aux. The first thing I do is command click the solo. So it's permanently soloed. I always do that first because it's very important. Very, very important. Do not forget that. Because it's a stereo aux input, because I want that sense of left and right space, I need to set the input to a stereo bus input. So I click on input. I choose a random bus that's free, bus 1 and 2. And then on the actual insert, I put my reverb. So let's say Dverb. Let's just go with the standard one, right? And I always set this reverb on the aux track to 100% wet. All right? The reverb on the aux is always 100% wet. Now, what am I going to do? Now, I'm going to send a copy of this vocal, right, this blue track. I'm going to go to my sends, click, and send a copy to that same bus 1 and 2. All right? That pops up the fader. I don't really need to see this because I can control this from here. If you want to know how to pop this up, it's command, click on the arrow, and it pops up. And now you send a copy of the vocal to your reverb, and it comes back on the stereo aux. So check this out.
When you say it got me, oh, I start to go and get cold feet. Now I might leave some things unsaid, but I ain't leaving nothing. Shit. Untouched, baby's just too good to be just good enough.
Right? That is the correct way to do reverb. You have the dry track and the reverberated track on the aux, or reverberated signal on the aux. Yo, I thought I was about to fucking have a stroke. Like reverberated signal. Yeah, so let me do that. Yeah, cool. Let me do it one more time, right? So this is the correct way to set up a reverb, right? Start from scratch. Here are your main tracks. You want to add reverb on vocals. The first thing you do is go to track, new track, and set up a stereo aux input track. Very important. I'm going to call this Vox Verb. Create. Right? Next, hold command and click on the solo button so it's permanently soloed or solo saved. Next, move up the track, go to the input. Set the input to a free bus. So anything that's not being used, and anything that's yellow is already being used, right? So you have to set the input to a free bus. It can be any number you want. So let's do 1920 in this case. On the insert, add the reverb of your choice. I'm going to add this thing called Lustrous Plates. It's one of my favorite reverbs that I go to a lot for vocals. Of course, it has to fucking update right now or refresh the license. There you go. I always go to this rhodium plate for some reason. Put your settings up. Then you're going to go back to the original vocal track, go to the send, go to bus, and choose that same bus that you used for the aux track, and you can see it's already highlighted. Bus 19 and 20, right? This fader is going to send a copy of this vocal to the reverb aux. So watch this. Hit play and turn this fader up.
Say it got me, oh, I start to go and get cold feet. Now I might leave some things unsaid, but I ain't leaving nothing. Shit. Untouched, baby's just too good to be just good enough.
Right? That is the correct way to send vocals to Reverb. Now you might be wondering, right? Hopefully you got this. This is very, very important. You have the dry signal, send a copy to the aux using a bus, and the aux does the reverberation. Now you might be wondering, well, why do I have to do it this way? It's such a fucking long, complicated way. Well, hold down, motherfucker. So two things. Well, actually a couple of things. One, you now have the vocals and the reverb on two separate channels, and you can dial them in exactly the way you want to, instead of always opening up the plugin and trying to guess where that ratio is. That's one reason. Two, on the actual reverb track, you can add effects. So you can add effects that just affect your reverb, right? Pretty damn cool. So on top of the reverb, maybe I can add an EQ, right? So maybe my reverb is a little different.
When you say you got me, I start to go and get cold feet. Now I might leave some things unsaid, but I ain't leaving nothing. Shit. Untouched, baby's just too.
Right? It's not affecting the dry vocals at all. All right? You can add effects and shape your reverb in this really fucking cool way. Like maybe afterwards you add something like a modulator, like an Enigma modulator.
When you say you got me, I start to go and get cold feet. Now I might leave some things unsaid, but I ain't leaving nothing.
You hear that? It's very hard to hear, but...
When you say you got me, I start to go and get cold feet.
Right? And that's only on the reverb. It's not on the original track. It's a fucking amazing way to fucking start getting creative with stuff. How the fuck did I do that? I've never seen it like this before. That's fucking dope. All right. Anyway. Oh, cool. Good to know. So that's how you do reverb. Okay? This is also how you do delays. Now, like I said, delays just basically repeat the signal over and over again. So check it out. It's going to be even more fun with delays. So I create a stereo Aux Input Track, and I call it Vox Delay, right? Always command click the solo button. Set the input to a free bus. I can't use 19 and 20 because that's already being used for reverb. So I'll use 21, 22. I'll add my delay plugin. I'm just going to go with the simple Mod 3 delay from Pro Tools. Now, go to my original track. Go to the sends, a new send, and send a copy to that bus 21, 22. So now, watch what happens when I turn this up.
When you say you got,
right?
when you say you got me, I start to go and get cold feet.
Now, again, there's nothing wrong with putting the plugin directly on the track. I want to make that very clear, right? This is technically the correct way to do things, but again, these are guidelines. Remember that. Like, I've fucking broken all these rules and put shit on these inserts that maybe it wasn't supposed. It doesn't, whatever it takes to get the sound. But there's a couple of reasons for why we do this. One, like I said, you can control them separately with faders. Two, you can process the time-based effects tracks separately from the dry track, right? So this is an example of that, and I'll give you the third reason in a second. So let's just look at delays real quick, right? So with delays, you can set up the time, right? How fast the delay should be, like ta 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 ta, or ta 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 ta, right? By using these music theory quarter notes, eighth notes, it's something more music theory related. And then you have this option of feedback. So right now, if I turn up the delay, you're hearing the feedback happen once. Right? One time. If I link the left and the right, because I chose a stereo delay for my purposes, right? I can click on link, and now whatever I do to the left side, it'll do it to the right side. So now I'm going to set both of them to quarter notes. If it's only one repetition, what you can do is increase the feedback. And what you're doing is you're feeding the delayed signal back into the delay, and that'll produce another delay and another delay and another delay, depending on how much you increase the feedback, right? So if I turn this up to like 40, right? If I go back to 0, that's it. If I turn it up a little bit, right? It's faster. Percentage determines how long it takes for the delayed signal to reach 0. Now, if I go 100%, you know what's going to happen. It's just going to go on like this forever. Right? So that's why feedback is important. Right? So check it out.
Say you got me, or I start to go and get cold feet. Now I might leave some things unsaid, but I ain't leaving nothing.
Now here's the problem, is that we never found the tempo of this track. Delays work best when you know the tempo, and you'll see why in a second. I'm just going to find the tempo real quick.
Force me not to run. I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now. Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
I think that's it.
Gotta learn a little more. Love it temporarily. In love, trying to get you some. Say, find out what's in store. Black leather sticking to your skin. Red lips dripping from your grin. Looks like I gotta learn a little more. Love it temporarily. In love, trying to get you some. Say what
right? It's way more in time. Delays only work best with when you're on tempo. If not, it sounds like shit. Yeah, quarter notes will be on time. Exactly. Once you have the tempo set and then your delay set up, then all this shit just snaps right into place, which is why I taught you the tempo thing right off the bat, right? Not just for editing, but for delay purposes as well. So very, very important. So there you go. You got a couple of... So here's what you can do with delay. Maybe with the delay, I'm just going to hold Command, click on this to open it up. With the delay... Maybe you want the delays to have a bit of a effect, but not the original signal.
say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run.
So what I can do is maybe add an EQ. Maybe add like a telephone effect on just the delayed signal, not the original.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run.
You know what I mean?
Can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now. Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I
Maybe add a fucking add some kind of flanger effect.
say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run.
Woo!
I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now. Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And
Oh man, this is where mixing starts to get fucking fun, man. Woo! All right. So there's a huge benefit of just having your effects, your time-based effects on aux tracks. See, if you put it on this original track, on the actual vocal track, you'd be affecting the entire vocals, not just the dry, but the wet as well. In this scenario that I have set up, I can affect just the time-based effects on their own, right? It's fucking wild. And here's the last piece of the puzzle. I told you, one, you have the faders separate, so you can actually deal with them separately on a volume basis. Two, you can process the reverb and the delay separate from the dry signal, which is perfect. And three, right now we're dealing with one vocal, right? What happens if we have 10 vocals, right? What if all these were vocals, right? Right? Are you going to put reverb on every single one of these vocals? Or are you going to send copies of all these vocals to one reverb track? Same with the delay. and you can dial in how much reverb for each vocals there is based on the send to the aux. That's how you do it. You're saving on processing power as well on top of everything, right? This is going to make way more sense as you get bigger and bigger sessions, right? And I'll show you an example in a second of like a pretty standard session, if you guys don't mind a little bit of rock. So yeah, there you go. Sending reverb, sending vocals just in general, or sending any instrument in general using sends is very, very important. You send a copy of the signal to your time-based effects, right? And the idea of buses is very, very important. Buses allow you to not only output the signal to one place, but also send copies of the signal to a place. The last step in all of this is key, right? What if, just like I said with that master fader, what if I actually want to EQ the entire vocal chain? Not just the dry vocals, but I want to EQ the vocals with the reverb, with the delay. I want to EQ it all in one shot. How am I going to do that? Again, putting an EQ on the individual track is different from putting an EQ on the overall picture, just like in the master fader case. So here's the last step. It's called subgrouping. Very, very important. I'll go into this again later, but again, a very important concept. Subgroups are done through aux inputs as well. So I create a stereo aux input. I call it vocal aux or sub, whatever you want to call it. Let's call it vocal sub. All right. First thing I do is I command click on the solo button. I set the input to a free bus, let's say 5960. And I personally always color my subgroups different from everything else, right? Just personally, right? I like to do that. I usually do red actually, but I'm starting to change to blue for some reason. Now, I need to send all three of these tracks to this subgroup, but I'm not going to send a copy. I want to output the entire signal of the vocals and the vocal reverb and the vocal delay to this subgroup. So I change the output. Remember, you change output to send the entire signal. You use a send to send a copy of the signal. Very important. I'm going to change the output of the main vocal, the dry vocal, to output bus 5960. And I'm going to do that on all three of these tracks. So now, when I hit play, all these three tracks are going to this vocal subgroup.
Say what you won't do for me, force me not.
See that?
But I can give you what you want right now.
And that means that I can EQ the entire vocals by putting an EQ effect on the insert of the subgroup. So check this out.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run. Well, I can't give
It's affecting
you what
everything.
You need, but I can give you what you want right now.
It's affecting everything. The dry vocal, the wet reverb, and the wet delay. This is how you properly organize sessions, or at least start to organize sessions. That is why I started making sure I did that bus and aux. That makes me everything so much easier. Yep. I do this on FL, but it makes it so much more sense when it's explained technically. Very good. That's how you mix drum. Yes, exactly. That's how you mix drums. Exactly. You group and I'm going to show you an example of that right now. Damn, we're doing good on time. That's awesome. So very, very important. This is how you do time-based, any kind of time-based effects, but primarily reverb and delay. This is how it's done, right? So let's go ahead and see if you guys are ready to see this. Are you ready? Are you ready? One man, one solution. What's that guy's name? Pablo Francisco. Funny dude. Hopefully this won't change the sample, right? Yes. All right, so this is an example of a session that I am currently mixing, and I wanted to show you, not to like intimidate you or anything, but just to give you a sense of what goes on in a big picture setting. There's a lot of things that you're going to see that you won't understand, but that's okay. Just want you to show how things can go out of hand if you don't stay organized, right? All right, here we go. So this is a session. It's a rock session, right? You can see that it's pretty dense. Right? It's got all kinds of tracks all the way through, right? When you're starting to deal with multiple tracks of this level, color coding and organizing becomes a huge part of organization. I don't have to think about where shit is. I already know. Brown is drums, right? Then we got guitars as green, right? Then we got synths and orchestra as purple. And then we got vocals as blue, right? So I already know where everything is. I'm not really confused about this shit. Might look intimidating because of the number of tracks, but if you break it down, it's really only 4 or 5 different instrumentations. There's brown. There's a slightly lighter brown for bass, actually, which you don't see, which is right over here, right? There's 2 browns. There's green, purple, and blue. So instead of like whatever, how many ever tracks this is, maybe 80 tracks or whatever, instead of 80 tracks, you're now dealing with 5 sections. This is what you do in an orchestration, right? When you think about a big orchestra, it's intimidating to think there's like 100 players, but if you break it down into string section, wind section, percussion, it becomes less intimidating. They still have to work together, but it's less intimidating, right? So if you look at the mix window, here's like a simple example. I have all these drums, right? These are all the drum mics and the subgroups of the drum mics. These are all subgrouped to a track right here called drums, right? So if I just solo that, and it's placed somewhere, it doesn't really matter. Bass. Got guitars. Right, we got all these different sections going on. Let's find a part that makes more sense. This is orchestra. There's all these purple tracks, right? So you're dealing with a lot less components, so it's less intimidating. But also, let's just take the example of vocals, right? How many vocal tracks do we have? Now look, all these vocals don't happen at the same time. So that itself eliminates some part of the intimidation because these aren't all happening at the same time. So that's a relief, right? Let's go to this bridge section. Here we go. Right? So now you got all these vocals, but look, I'm only going to one of the reverb tracks. I didn't even create a second reverb. All these vocals are using buses to go to your reverbs. You see that? All these things on top, these are buses sending copies of the vocal. So if I want something to have more reverb, say if I want bridge main to have more reverb, I would just dial that up. If I wanted the harmonies to have more reverb, So this is where you start to become way more efficient in your mixes. There's no point trying to work it around in terms of like, oh, I got 80 tracks, so I got a fucking EQ and blah, 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 every. No, you got to get way smarter about this stuff. That's how you fucking make records, man. So if you think about all the tracks here, these are the main subgroups: drums, bass, guitars, miscellaneous, so like synths and orchestras and stuff, and vocals. I've essentially taken this huge thing, divided it up into different sections, and because I've subgrouped them and used buses and everything, the reverbs, the delays, all that shit becomes way more efficient. Anyway, it's just an example I wanted to show you, just so that you get a sense of like what a session might look like. Now look, I'm not going to say that every single session is going to look like this. I'm sure you'll have much simpler sessions as well, but simple does not necessarily mean like it's easy to do. Let's see if we can find something else, right? Let's see, I didn't really do anything. So here's an example of another session. This is a live session that I recorded a while ago, so let's see. Actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to play that yet, so just give me a second. Don't think they've released that, so can't do that. Here you go. Here's another live session, right? In a live setting, things are a little bit more organic in my opinion, so I kind of like that. So here we go. You've got piano reverb, right? I just want you to start looking at the sessions as to how we can organize things and make them a little bit clearer. Piano left and right, because I use 2 microphones for the piano. Each left and right is going to a reverb. A copy is going to a reverb, and all 3 of them are going to a piano subgroup. We got violin, viola. It looks like a string quartet. Looks like violin, viola, cello. Oh, it's maybe a trio. The room mics of those, and then there's some duplicate. I think they're like counter melodies and stuff. Right? So you got all of these. All of these are sending a copy to a reverb over here. Look, without the reverb, sounds fine. With the reverb, sounds a lot more lush and like it gives you the sense that you're in a room with a fucking string trio, right? And then you got vocals. It's one live vocal track with some reverbs and delays, right?
Right, but I'll give you your closure.
And all together,
on the sweet summer night when hell freezes over, I'll wait till Saint Nobody's Day, the night when pigs fly, when you come back to me.
fucking love her voice. So look, all it is piano, strings, vocals. Even though there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 tracks, you divide it down into 3 main groups. So then you focus on making the piano sound good, making the strings sound good, and making the vocals sound good.
Summer night.
And then you focus on how they relate to each other, how these 3, how the piano fits with the strings, fits with the vocals. That's how you mix. You kind of break it down, but then also make them work cohesively within each other as well. So there you go. That's an intro to plugins and mixing. Aux groups, subgroups, bus, master fader, master faders. So they're almost like master faders, but for the individual instruments, right? So it's pretty awesome. So I'm gonna, let's go back to Zoom because I think that was kind of a lot.